Of course, it's a great idea to start with a definition. A lot of people know what we mean by this, but just to be clear, that in-service greeting is the moment in your worship service where you take the moment to express the love of Christ by welcoming everyone who has come into your midst. Some may call it the passing of the peace, and they may start it off with a more liturgical greeting, and then everybody gets up and starts walking around, shaking hands, talking with people, perhaps giving hugs to people that they know. It is this particular moment in the service where intentionally your congregation is at work at visiting one with another. This is the opportunity to briefly welcome the visitors who are in your midst and briefly welcome one another into the house of God. It's a chance to tangibly express a love, a joy, and a concern. What was the weirdest one? I'm not sure that this is the weirdest one, but it was certainly the most awkward out of all the churches that I visited. This only happened last year. We showed up about 20 minutes late, my wife and I. We were visiting a particular church just for the one Sunday, and we knew that it was going to be only that one Sunday. But we were late, so we were seated late, and we got there just prior to this particular moment of the service. The announcer stands up and says, "Let's love up on one another for the next 10 minutes or so." And my initial gut reaction was, 10 minutes? How on earth are we going to visit with people that we don't even know for 10 minutes? During the moment, we received one or two people who came up and gave a handshake, but a handshake and a good morning, and then they moved on to visit with people that they actually knew. As we sat there during those 10 minutes, it was very clear that many of these people had been going to church together for the last several years. It was clear to us that they were visiting with each other. We could overhear conversations about things like, how is your mom recovering from her surgery? How did the move go this weekend? Hey, how did your son's sports team do on the Saturday game? We could hear all those conversations going on for this 10 minutes. It was very clear that these people were visiting one with another, relating to one another, catching up on each other's busy life. But for us as the visitors, we sat there and endured that for about 10 minutes. Even my wife commented on the fact that this was a very awkward moment, and we felt like we were the only ones who were not engaged in a conversation with anyone. It put us on the spot to try to force ourselves to engage with somebody, or simply take the easy road and just sit there and wait for this endurable or this hard to endure moment to pass. Eventually it did, and we went on with the service. Of course, that story leads up to your next question, which is, what was one of the most memorable ones that we've experienced? Once again, my wife and I found ourselves visiting a church, and we visited this church a couple of times over the last few years, but the first time that we visited that church, this particular moment of the service came around. When it did, the couple that sat in the pew in front of us actually turned around and engaged us in small talk. It was meaningful, it was genuine, it was polite, it was genuinely curious about who we were and what brought us to church that day, and they shared a little bit about themselves. The in-service greeting was a short time, but that particular moment, it actually felt too short because we were engaged in a pretty nice get-to-know-you type conversation. What this couple did was focus on us as the visitor instead of trying to greet as many people as possible. The power of that particular greeting actually wound up doing something different when the service was over, causing us to do something different when the service was over. They once again turned around when the service was over and continued to welcome us into their midst. They continued to engage us in small talk, and as it turns out, we actually lingered long enough to be one of the remaining couples at the church to help lock the church up when it was over. This is one of the experiences that I remember the most out of all of the churches that I've visited over the last several years. As I've experienced many different welcomes, there is clear one thing that you don't want to do during this time. Your visitors don't like it, and that is to single them out as a visitor. I've seen churches that make visitors stand up, make visitors say who they are, where they're from. And if one of the biggest fears of many people is public speaking, you've suddenly caused one of the greatest fears in the life of the visitor. Now, some very well may have no problem doing that. They're somewhat extroverted, but for many people it is actually quite a challenge to stand up in front of a group of total strangers and introduce themselves. Another way that churches try to get around that is that they tell the visitors to stay seated and let everyone else stand up, and then go find someone who's seated down. And that creates just all sorts of other socially awkward moments where the church members are standing over the visitors who are sitting down. I've been in situations like that, and I'll just stand up as well because I don't like it. Others have gone so far as to deliver a flower or make sure that the ushers deliver their visitor welcome packet, or they've done some other things to help single out that visitor. I've even heard of one church that took a photo of them when they volunteered themselves as a visitor and gave them a memento of their visit by printing it out and sticking it in a picture frame. And I can imagine that that is the first church of the mugshot. Certainly, the key thing in this in-service greeting is not to single out the visitors, but allow the visitors to remain as anonymous as they want. Let me give you 3 things to keep in mind when it comes to the in-service greeting. The first off is keep it brief. It doesn't have to be a very long moment. You'll certainly want to give the opportunity for people to express care, concern, compassion, some joy. But you don't want to drag it out for an incessant amount of time to give space for your visitors to feel pretty awkward when no one's paying attention to them. So just simply keep it brief. There are times where 5 minutes may be appropriate. There are times where maybe only 3 minutes may be appropriate. You kind of have to judge what's happening, but the idea is to keep it brief. A second thing to keep in mind is to keep it sincere and genuine. If you are the one who is making the worship announcement, keep your invitation to this moment pretty sincere. Don't make it sound the same week after week after week. In fact, doing that makes this time actually seem insincere. It seems like a toss-away moment. It seems like a moment in the worship service where you need to clear the band off the stage and this is just something to do during that awkward moment. But rather, keep it sincere, keep it brief. You want to express your joy that the visitors are there in your midst. You want to express care and compassion. The third thing to keep in mind at this moment is that this is where ushers and greeters can particularly make sure that your visitors are greeted. They need to be able to be paying attention to see who may not be being engaged in this moment and take the initiative to go and give that greeting and that warm welcome and hello. Actually, the in-service greeting can be a fantastic time for your pastor or the worship leader to once again remind the congregation of the importance of welcoming the visitors. It is a chance to cast that vision once again about how to receive visitors in your congregation. It can be a chance to express how you value visitors and how you are grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit of the love of Jesus in their life. Those moments of announcing or of setting up that particular moment of the worship service can be that awesome way to passively reinforce the values of hospitality in your congregation. One of the questions that I'm often asked is, how do we cast that vision? And this in-service greeting is an opportunity to do that. First off, let me say this. A lot of people search and come to the EvangelismCoach.org website looking for the right thing to say to your church visitors or the right way to make this kind of announcement. It is as if we approach the right way as if it is a magic formula, that if we say the right words, your visitors will want to come back for the second time. Of course, I think all of us recognize that that is not reality. What we want to do is to say things that are sincere and genuine. You might use this opportunity, as I mentioned, to cast the vision for hospitality by reminding people or expressing your value. We love having visitors with us. We are grateful that you are here today. We won't make you stand up if you don't want to. We won't call you out. We won't embarrass you. In fact, we'll give you the space to be as anonymous as you would like. Another one that I like to hear is that if this is your first time or your second time here, or maybe the first time in a long time, we are glad that you are here. I love hearing some of those things. It gives just a brief moment to recognize the presence of visitors, cast that vision for hospitality again, and then give people a chance to greet and welcome one another. Actually, this is a great moment to help your visitors take the next step into building a relationship with your congregation. You can actually give visitors a very clear next step as to what they can do. And here's what I think works really well. Of course, as you're making your announcement, if this is your first time here or if this is your first time in a long time, why don't you take the connection card that we have, go ahead and fill it out and bring it to the visitor welcome center that we have for you out in the lobby or the tent out in the area. Give them a simple, clear next step. Then you can say, well, I will be there to meet with you. I'll be there to say thank you for coming to the worship service. I'll be there to give you a free gift that our church would like to give you. It'll also give me a chance to put a face to a name and perhaps find a way to pray with you or for you during the week. By providing that simple next step, you can help the visitor know exactly what's expected of them, know exactly what they should do in order to find out a little bit more information about your church.